Hello, welcome. My name's Ryan, and this is Charles, and we're counselors at New Creation Counseling Center, and we're going to try some new stuff this year with our social media, and one of those is making some videos. I think my goal is, and the goal of the agency is to bless the community that we're placed in. One of the ways we want to do that is by providing content on Facebook and things like that, I want to provide things that are educational, that are informative. I think what we're going to talk about today is trauma. It's one of these kind of buzzwords you hear in mental health circles and mental health professionals. A lot of people talk about trauma. Charles, I would say, is someone who's very knowledgeable about trauma, and I kind of wanted to pick your brain for the camera here and the millions of people who are watching us right now through Facebook. But just kind of average Joe is sitting there watching this. Why would it be important for them to know what trauma is, and just to be concerned about mental health, I guess? Or well, let's start with trauma. What is trauma? Like I said, it's this buzzword, and a lot of people say it. And what the heck is it?
Yeah, it is a buzzword, and that makes it difficult for a lot of people to understand actually what we're talking about. I like to just use a different word sometimes and talk about its origins. Language origin is the word wound. It comes from the Greek, which means wound. And when you think about it like that, well, my goodness, I think that's all human beings have wounds, right?
Okay.
So I talk about trauma on a broad scale, in that every human being experiences trauma at some point in their life and their development. But not every human being develops the symptoms for PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder.
So being wounded is linked to this thing called PTSD that a lot of people have heard about and stuff like that. So how is somebody wounded? It's not a physical wound. It's an emotional wound. It's a mental wound.
It can be an emotional or a psychological wound. I mean, the reason why this is confusing is it's such a big topic. You can be wounded. Of course, what a lot of people say, believe it or not, a lot of people in my office will say, "Oh, I can't have PTSD. I've never been in the military. I've never been in combat." So people still actually believe that you can't have post-traumatic stress disorder unless you have been in combat, and we know for sure that's not the case. So you can have childhood wounds such as sexual, physical, emotional, spiritual abuse, and develop symptoms of PTSD, or not even develop symptoms of PTSD. That childhood woundedness or trauma can lead to dysfunction in relationships, very common. It can lead to anxiety, depression, can be linked in there and not meet the full span of criteria for that disorder.
Right. So when we were learning about PTSD in school, or kind of the research or whatever, it's you've had to experience like a life-threatening event, or feeling like your life was in danger. So oftentimes military, like actually being assaulted or something like that. You're saying a lot of other things kind of qualify as having the effect of causing a wound for somebody psychologically, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, let's take a one that I see a lot of. There's in a marriage, for example, so maybe one of the partners has an affair. The other person frequently has symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder because that's a huge wound. We would call that betrayal trauma. It's its own special kind of trauma.
So what happens to a person when they have experienced something like that, when they have this wound, and how does that impact the person?
Yeah, any number of things. There's so many different things. First of all, it can impact the body, the physical health. You can develop physical symptoms like gastrointestinal symptoms. It can affect your heart health. You can gain weight, lose weight. There's all kind of physical things that can happen. Then there are things like when I'm thinking about the diagnostic criteria. Those are just the way we spell out that particular diagnosis, PTSD. You can have negative thought patterns develop about yourself, like, I'm not safe, men aren't safe, this world is not a safe place. That can be actually debilitating. A lot of people develop hypervigilance. That's just this extra sensitivity to your surroundings, always knowing like who just passed by the door, how many people are in this room right now.
That's something that I've heard a lot of clients, like when we start talking about this sort of thing, they're like, yeah, like when I go to a restaurant, I have to face the door, that sort of thing. So that, I don't know, is it pretty common?
So I kind of specialize in this, so from my perspective, it looks very common. I did just hear a stat. I was re-listening to a book called "The Body Keeps the Score" by Bessel van der Kolk, which is like the best book on trauma that I know about. And he was saying that half the people that we see in a mental health setting like this at New Creation have trauma-related injuries when they walk through the door, even if they don't meet the criteria for PTSD.
They have trauma-related injuries.
Mhm.
Okay.
I've also heard the stat that, and I can't tell you where this one is from, but that 70% of complaints in just family doctor's office have emotional and psychological roots.
So you'd mentioned kind of betrayal trauma, maybe childhood trauma. Can you rattle off a few kind of common life experiences? Because I guess at the end of the day, I want people watching this, if this is a relevant issue for them, I want them to understand maybe what's happening, where it came from, that if they're experiencing symptoms like hypervigilance or fear or avoidance or kind of the negative thought patterns, that they can feel like it's understandable, it's normal, it's not like I'm just some weirdo having these kind of crazy things happen to me. So what are some other things that someone watching this may have experienced where it might have led to this wound? We may not have thought about it that way, but it is something that, wow, this did impact me, and it might be worth not even just coming to get help. This isn't an ad for counseling. It's just to understand our inner experience and understand kind of what's happened in my life and make sense of what's happened in my life. So what are some of these other experiences?
Yeah, so a big one that I see is what we label as developmental trauma. That is any kind of woundedness or trauma that happens from birth, really from being in the wound all the way through age 18. And that kind of woundedness can be, there's like trauma A and trauma B, okay? So trauma B would be bad things that happen to you, like being abused physically or sexually or emotionally, whereas trauma A would be what we call the trauma of absence, right? So not receiving what you needed to receive as a child, not receiving physical warmth and affection from your parents, not receiving adequate medical care. All of those can be traumatic as well. Abandonment wounds, things like that. So they're, yes.
Abandonment wounds. So that's another kind of phrase that, I hear a lot and we talk about, but I want to make sure we kind of understand what you mean by an abandonment wound.
Sure. So when one of your primary caretakers, typically mom and dad, if both of them aren't both physically present and emotionally present in the home because of divorce or death or illness or something else, that leaves a wound, because my personal belief is we're designed to have mom and dad there with us in our upbringing. And
So there's this kind of natural need that we have for mom and dad that provide a certain kind of love and attention and a relationship.
Right.
When that's not there, it doesn't take this life-threatening event to cause, the trauma or this emotional or psychological wound.
That's exactly right.
That then leads to some of these symptoms that you were talking about earlier.
Right.
Okay.
For example, a couple that I might be seeing, if one in the couple didn't have the experience of a loving, nurturing mom or dad, that's going to impact their relationship directly. They might have a fear that my spouse is going to leave. And they're always worried and stressed about that, and their behavior might flow out of that fear.
So, like, one of the impacts of this wound is that it really starts to shape the way you interact with people in the present day, kind of based on, I call them rules. We learn rules about other people, what to expect from them, and all that, but just shaped by those early relationships there.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, very important.
So, what if we finish up with, I don't know if you could think of an example of a kind of a childhood relationship dynamic that maybe a lot of people have experienced. It wasn't this, out of this world kind of life-threatening big time event, but it was a subtle thing that, might lead to kind of them having these wound issues today. Just an example that you see a lot of a childhood kind of relationship dynamic.
Sure. I can think of, I can think of a couple of different people that I've spoken to in the past where the child had a physical illness, and the parents did not seek medical care for them And especially in the case where I've heard of cases where the mom or dad has been like a medical provider, like a nurse or something, and yet they didn't get the child to the appropriate care, something like that. I do want to say one more thing with that, and that is that a lot of times adult clients will start talking about these things, and walls will go up because a lot of it has having to do with the fourth commandment, to honor thy father and mother. People will get defensive.
Yeah.
And I want to say that this is absolutely not about blaming people.
But they think you're trying to get them to maybe talk bad or
Right.
disrespect their
Exactly.
parents.
Right. It's not about that. It's not about blaming mom and dad necessarily. It's just about saying that we have wounds and our parents play a role in that, and it's more about accountability.
Okay.
And the fact is, I'm a parent and I've made many mistakes, and probably my children will have experienced wounds in
Sure.
my home too. We all do this, part of our humanity. It's not about blame. It's about taking accountability and being able to say, that was wrong, that was inappropriate, should not have happened, and this is the impact it's had on my life.
Yeah, just as not about blaming, but understanding that led to this impact on my current life, and just having a better
Right.
understanding of yourself.
Exactly.
And I don't want to make you
Right
feel
there.
bad. I'm a parent too. I have made zero mistakes in my
Oh,
parenting,
man.
so
Okay, good.
I, just
Good.
not judging you, but just
Right.
for myself. It's maybe I will in the future.
Sure.
So far, nothing. So
Mhm.
I'm kidding. And on that note, we will wrap it up. So thank you for joining us for our very first Facebook video. This is Charles. I'm Ryan, and hopefully this will be the first in a long line of award-winning, moving, insert adjective here videos. Thank you guys for joining us. Take care.